Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Buckeye Mike. And today we're going to have yet another Pac 12 roundtable as we sit alongside our good friend Richie, who was nice enough to join us over from, of course, the Locked On Network, covering your Locked On Sun Devils over there. So today we're going to talk some Arizona State football for 2023, and I hope y'all enjoy. So, let's start here with Coach Dillingham. What's the fan base's attitude towards Kenny, and what was it like when Kenny was hired on? What was the process in your eyes? Did you think that Kenny would have been the one to be hired to be the head coach? What do you think drew Arizona State to end up hiring Kenny Dillingham?
Yeah, so Dillingham is a local kid. He grew up in what we call the Valley out here. So for people that are familiar with Arizona, that's all the cities and towns that are revolving around Phoenix. If you're not, it's like Tempe, Glendale, Peoria, tons and tons and tons of cities and towns that are central to Phoenix. We call it the Valley. And one of the things that Kenny Dillingham wanted to do when he was initially hired is he created a hashtag called Activate the Valley. And what he wants to do is bring in these NIL opportunities and these local businesses to help promote the Arizona State Sun Devils football team and all the other athletics as well, not just football, basketball, baseball, softball, volleyball, like getting all these investors and small businesses to want to help promote these athletes and then in turn have the athletes want to promote those businesses. So NIL was a very big deal for him. And when he was hired, he's actually an alumnus to Arizona State. He graduated back in like 2010, 2011 and was an assistant like a graduate assistant on the football team. He ends up following Mike Norvell over to Memphis, and that's really where his career starts to get rolling. From there, he's an offensive coordinator at Auburn, Florida State, and Oregon before winding up at Arizona State. When the job became open following the departure of Herm Edwards, Dillingham was instantly the front runner for the position, and it just made a lot of sense. He's a young, innovative offensive mind. He's a local. He's an alumnus of the program. He's a very, very good recruiter. When you look at his time between his different programs, he helped get Dante Moore, a five-star quarterback, to initially commit to Oregon. And the reason why he decommitted is because Dillingham left. He was able to help get Jordan Travis down at Florida State. Like, he's really good at recruiting. We've already seen that. He brought in Jaden Rashada, a really highly regarded four-star quarterback who was initially committed to Florida. They were able to pull him in after he decommitted. We've already seen the impact that he has as a recruiter. The fan base, as you were asking me, how was the reception? Everyone loved it. Everyone was really happy with this young guy who had so many high aspirations for the program and who loves where he is. He described it as his dream job. The first thing he opened his press conference with, he said, "I'm home." He wants to be here. This doesn't feel like a job that he's going to use to leapfrog himself to a new opportunity. It doesn't feel like we need to worry about him leaving the program if Ohio State or Alabama or Georgia opened up. Kenny Dillingham wants to be at Arizona State. It's where he grew up. It's where he went to college. Like, this is the dream job that he's always wanted. And with all of those factors coming into play here, this is absolutely a guy that the fan base are gravitating towards. And everyone's really starting to get excited. The problem with Arizona sports is you have so many people that are very fickle fans and they want to wait and see how it actually happens. So you've got fans that are on the fence about Dillingham, but when he starts winning, not if he starts winning, people are going to buy back in. Arizona State's going to be one of the hottest tickets in town to go see them on Saturdays. We're really excited about the future with him. I think that there's just so much potential, so much upside, and so much excitement with what Dillingham is bringing to Arizona State.
To to talk a little bit more about Dillingham, how has he, since he's come, how has he impacted recruiting? And what does the 24 recruiting class look like for Arizona State?
So, like I said, he's really already made a big time improvement in the recruiting. There was a point in time with Herm Edwards and the previous staff at Arizona State that they were just not pulling anyone in. And they at one point last year had 4 recruits and a recruiting class outside of the top 100 for a Power 5 program. But Dillingham comes in and they propel themselves up into the top 50 in the 2023 class. They recreated that class in 6 months and turned it from outside the top 100 to inside the top 50. And another part of that was the transfers. They got a lot of transfers to come into the university who had SEC playtime, who had Big Ten playtime. Like they brought in so many guys that did so many different things for all sorts of different programs, and it's one of the things that really got people to buy into Arizona State. And as far as recruiting for 2024, he's really started to get that activated as well. They have 17 or 18 recruits as of right now, and a top 40 recruiting class, depending on where you look. 24/7 has them top 35 right now. I think they were at 33 last I checked. But they're bringing these guys in, and they're bringing them in from a variety of places. He said he wants to activate the Valley. He's getting the kids in Arizona to stay at the program and to want to commit to the local team. He's pulling kids from California. They're crossing boundaries to Texas, which Arizona State has not done a good job recruiting since the Todd Graham era, where Graham was a Texas local. They bring in Brian Carrington as the defensive backs coach and Rashad Samples as the wide receivers coach with those Texas ties and with good recruiting prowess. And suddenly they're bringing in these Texas kids. They're getting kids from all throughout the country to come to Arizona and to play at Arizona State. And it's just phenomenal to see. So while Arizona State hasn't hit the home run yet, quote unquote, they don't have that 5-star commit. They're getting a lot of guys. And the most important thing that Dillingham has reiterated many a times when he's asked is he's getting the guys that are going to build his culture and build his philosophy up. The guys that he trusts the keys with to the program that he wants to build up. He's making it in his image with his kind of players. So no, they don't have a 5-star yet, but they're getting these 3-star kids, these 4-star kids, and building the program up with guys that they trust are going to be a great infrastructure and lay the groundwork for what they want to do for the future.
So speaking of, you were saying about Dylan Rashada. What is the outlook for Dylan, and who, in your opinion, who do you think will eventually be the starting quarterback? Because you did tell me off air that there's not one selected yet.
Yeah, so Jaden Rashada is an incoming 4-star prospect out of Pittsburgh, California. Very highly regarded guy that they were able to grab from Florida when he decommitted from there. And Jaden is looking like the future of the program. He was the prized possession of Kenny Dillingham's first class at Arizona State. And he's the guy that is going to be, for the foreseeable future, the face of the program. But it's a matter of getting to that point. And what we need to understand is Jaden Rashada might not be ready to start week 1. Like, he might need some time to grow. And in the meantime, Arizona State's got 2 really good veteran options. Trenton Bourguet is coming back for his redshirt senior year. He has been a guy that has just waited and bided his time on the team and got an opportunity last year in the wake of an Emory Jones injury. And once he took over, they never looked back. He was a very good quarterback. He was averaging almost 300 yards per game passing. He threw 11 touchdowns in 6 starts. He was the energizer that the team needed at the position. And the offense really started to get rolling with him. You saw Elijah Badger, the wide receiver, and Jalen Conyers, the tight end, their game took a next step in a level up for them when when Trenton Bourguet took over at quarterback. So he's one of the favorites right now. But you also have Drew Pine coming in from Notre Dame, and Pine was also very, very important in the Fighting Irish's turnaround last year. They started off the year 0-2 with a loss to Marshall in South Bend when they had Tyler Buckner under center. They go to Drew Pine and they don't look back. They end up being one of the better teams in the nation. They won, I think, double-digit games with him. And they ended up being a much more competent program. So Drew Pine decides to transfer to Arizona State, and suddenly you've got tons of options at the quarterback spot because you have Jaden Rashada coming in, a 4-star recruit who looks like a very, very talented quarterback. But you also have other options. You have Drew Pine, the savvy veteran who transferred from Notre Dame, a proven program. You have Trenton Bourguet, the fan favorite that everyone loves and gravitates to because he is just such an outgoing personality. He's easy to like. He's easy to love. He's easy to root for. You have a really good program. It's funny, in the pros, you have that saying, if you have 2 quarterbacks, you don't have any. But that's just not true in college. You want that depth and you want to know that you have different options. And Arizona State has different options. You've got Bourguet, you've got Pine, you've got Rashada. You don't need to force Jaden out there as a freshman. If you want to take your time with him, you can go with Pine. You can go with Bourguet. This doesn't mean you have to sit Jaden. If Jaden looks great in camp, you start Jaden. But this allows you to not feel forced to throw a freshman quarterback out there because you've got a redshirt senior and a redshirt sophomore at quarterback. You allow yourself that opportunity to make sure that you're handling your quarterback situation right. And as we all know, there is no position more important than quarterback and making sure that you have that right. So a very good situation that the Sun Devils are in with their thrower right now.
All right. So overall, it sounds like the quarterback room is probably one of the strongest rooms within the team.
I like to think so. There's good depth, and don't get me wrong, I'm not saying this is in the Pac-12 in the top half of the Pac-12, especially because it is the quarterback conference this year. Every team has a quarterback. So I won't say that Arizona State is in the top 6 of the Pac-12 with their quarterback play. But when you look at a roster that's rebuilding, retooling, and reintegrating itself with a new system and with a new culture, you're in a pretty good spot at the quarterback position, and you can't ask for much more than that.
So, as our good friend John said, in my opinion, are Pine and Rashada. I'm going Rashada. I don't know much about the other guy.
Yeah, so Rashada is the flashier guy. He's a highly recruited kid. He's got a cannon on his right arm. He can throw that thing down the field. He's mobile too. He can take off in the pocket. He's a guy who can extend plays with his legs, but he can also take off and beat you as a runner. He does a little bit of everything for you. And when you have a guy that has that athleticism and has the capability to take over games by himself, it's natural to want to go with him. I really don't have any problem with any of these quarterbacks starting. If you want the most exciting player and you want the guy that is going to put heat in the seats with fans there, Jaden Rashada is probably the guy. I don't think you can go wrong with any of them, but if 90% of people want Jaden Rashada, totally understand why.
So now as we get into the thick of things and we look at the schedule, first of all, does ASU have the ability and pieces in place to make a New Year's Six Bowl?
Unfortunately, no. And I don't know that they're going to be there probably for about 3 years, I imagine. That's when you hope that you have built that momentum to start getting into national conversations about being a very good team. But it's funny, I was talking about this today on my podcast, Locked On Sun Devils, and it's a team that for majority of the year, we're at the end of July, so 7 months, for 7.5 months, pretty much all but one day, I have been like very, very much a This is a 4-win team. It's a very tough schedule. If you guys are looking on the visual, you see that schedule right there. It is a very difficult schedule. You would be very happy to get 4 wins, but suddenly you talk to the players, you talk to the assistant coaches, you talk to Kenny Dillingham. The way everyone is just exuding this confidence and this mantra of people are sleeping on us. We're the underdogs. We are more determined than we ever have been to prove the doubters wrong. Suddenly you sit there and you're like, is this a bowl team? Like, is this a 6-6 program? Like, it has started the conversation when you start looking at this team that really truly believes in itself. You're coming off a 3-win year. So expectations are very low. When I say 4 wins, that is better than what you had last year. You take that and run. But with the way that everyone is talking about this team, suddenly you feel like they could overachieve.
Mm-hmm.
The expectations are not high for this team. I think multiple Vegas outlets have them at 5.5 wins, which is a very tough line. But suddenly you might be able to see it. You might see an upset. Like, they've got some pretty winnable games against Colorado, Cal, and Southern Utah. You might be able to sneak a UCLA. You might be able to sneak a Fresno State or an Oklahoma State. Like, there are games on here that if you play to the way that these guys are talking about the program, you could pull off some upsets this year. As far as the New Year's Six Bowl goes, I don't think it's close. There's too many good teams throughout the country, and even in the Pac-12, the Sun Devils are definitely in that second, maybe even third tier of the conference. But they do feel like if everything goes right, they could push for a 500 season and be a bowl eligible team, which would be massive for the program.
Absolutely. I do think, as you were saying earlier, I do think that Kenny, because he seems like he wants to be there, and like you said, you don't have to worry about him possibly running off, that he can actually, maybe obviously not right away, but he can slowly start to build the program to a, potential playoff team, and just being in big bowl games, which of course, with the 12 team around the corner, all of the big bowl games are in the playoffs. So,
yeah, it's just a matter of getting to that point. But I do think that Kenny's going to be one of those guys that's going to eventually get you to that point. He has that desire and he has the love and the passion for this program that it feels like you haven't had for quite some time. Probably since Todd Graham in the heat of his days as Arizona State's head coach when they won 10 games in back-to-back years. Kenny has that same desire. He has that same passion for the program to be able to get them back to that promised land. Like, you look at just the way he talks about Arizona State, you can tell he loves it here. It's not fake. It's not manufactured love for a program. I mentioned earlier, this is his dream job. He has said that himself, and you look at him and you believe him. You don't doubt that he feels this way about the program. And when you have that kind of passion and that love for what you're doing in your job as a coach, as a player, as an executive, whatever it is, when you have that level of love for what you're doing, good things happen. And Kenny Dillingham is going to get this team back on track. If everything goes right, people have referred to Arizona State as a sleeping giant before. And I think that if it goes right, that Arizona State could realize their potential and they can be one of the best teams in the Pac-12. We got to remember USC and UCLA are departing for the Big Ten. Mm-hmm. This leaves a massive hole and opportunity for a team to step into the limelight. You have Oregon, Washington, and Utah. Who's that fourth team? It might be Oregon State. It might be Arizona State. The opportunity is there for you. It's just a matter of seizing it and getting to that point. But I do think Dillingham's going to get them there.
I would hope so. I know that they've been kind of roller coastery over the past decade or so.
Yes, absolutely. Lots of good highs and lots of low lows.
So another question that we have, he turned down 13 million for the Gator Collective, didn't he? So I'm wondering if he was promised the start.
Yeah, so that's a very complicated situation. From what I was able to understand and gather from it, there was that much money that was promised to him, but the problem is they made that promise and they didn't back up their word. They weren't able to actually provide that for him. And when you have this call a spade, when you have this kind of lie and deception almost, it's
Mm-hmm.
going to turn off a lot of kids. And like a 17, 18-year-old kid who is promised that much money and then is told, hey, you're not going to get that money, even though we told you that. And that's one of the reasons you came here. It's going to hurt. So, like, it, it sucks to see because you talk about the purity of college football and how there's people who say NIL is ruining college football, and people will highlight that as one of the reasons why. But here's what I'll tell you. When he came to Arizona State, we asked Kenny Dillingham about it. He had a press conference regarding Jaden Rashada, and he told us this: we did not make him false promises. And we do not think that you should be making that much money as a true freshman. You have to earn it. So when Kenny Dillingham brought Jaden Rashada in, that was absolutely one of everybody's, including me, our biggest concern was, is Jaden Rashada just interested in a paycheck? Does he really care about football? And he comes to Arizona State and he's talked to the media about this. We have had conversations with him after practices and whatnot. And he addresses it and he says, no, I'm here for Arizona State. I'm not here to cash a paycheck. I'm not here to build my brand up to where it's all that matters to me. He's more interested in making the best situation of himself so that down the road he can get to that point. He wants to be able to get to that point. Every kid does. Every 18, 19-year-old kid would love to make millions of dollars. But instead of guaranteeing it up front, Kenny Dillingham tells this kid the NIL deals will come to you, but you have to earn it. And that kind of fire that he has lit under Jaden Rashada is what's going to be able to get him to that point. So while it wasn't a great beginning because of what it looked like from the outside with the Florida situation, there's a lot more moving parts. And that would be the reason why he left Florida to come to Arizona State, was things just fell through. There were false promises made, and he felt like that was not a program that was a good fit for him because of those false promises.
All right, so now let's get into everyone's favorite discussion, schedule talk. So as I look over this schedule, this is kind of where I stand. I do think that as long as Arizona State stays healthy and Rashada actually looks like he does fit into the system and that this is a good spot for him. To me, their ceiling is 7-5 because I really look at the schedule and only see 5 games that they could lose, but there's always that, well, they were just off tonight or today and they had a slip up and that's why they lost to a Cal or a Southern Utah or one of the teams that you're not supposed to lose to.
Right. Yeah. This I would agree with you that 7-5 is a best case scenario. That's where all the pieces fall into place. The defense totally turns things around under defensive coordinator Brian Ward, and they go from one of the worst in the Pac-12 to one of the best in the Pac-12. You talk about guys on offense like Jalen Conyers, Elijah Badger, Cameron Scatabo, that turn into superstars within the conference and help lift up that offense. And then you get good play out of the quarterback, whether it's Rashada, whether it's Pine, whether it's Bourget. You're able to get all of that effort as a complete unit and turn it into a great season. So I would agree with you that 7-5 is the best case scenario. My worst case scenario is probably 4-8, and that's where I've been sitting for a long time, is 4-8. It's just a tough schedule. You've got Oklahoma State, Fresno State, USC, Washington State, UCLA, Utah, Oregon. There are so many really good teams on this schedule. But I also believe that this could potentially be a team that does sneak and get a few surprising wins. Like Oklahoma State is a very winnable game. Fresno State is going to be in Tempe. They might sneak up on them. They could surprise a Washington State or UCLA who feel like they're going to be trending more down this year. And when it comes to Arizona State versus that team down south, that's always a great, great game. It's one of the best rivalries in college football that no one talks about. ASU had won 5 straight before dropping last year, and one that came down to the wire. I have a feeling that Arizona State is going to be back on top in that game. I will always pick Arizona State to win that game, though, totally being like full disclosure. But if everything goes right, they could sneak out 7 wins and get a few upsets. But if things go the way I think they're going to go, they're going to be closer to a 4-win team than they're going to be a 7-win team.
Okay. Because to me, like, I think their obvious losses are going to be Oklahoma State, SC, Washington, Utah, and Oregon. The rest of them, I feel like they could have a chance. I mean, I kind of look at that back-to-back September 30th and October 7th with Cal and Colorado. Now, yeah, Cal's on the road. Colorado's at home. But I think those are both winnable games because it is Deion's first year. Cal is down in the toilet right now. And then UCLA, it is at the Rose Bowl. It's at UCLA, so it will be difficult. But I do think, not having DTR, transitioning, getting ready to go to the Big Ten, and there's just so much going on with UCLA, I think that game could be winnable. I know I said Oregon's probably a lot or most likely a loss, but you never know with Oregon. All you got to do is make Bo Nix run around and tweak his ankle or something like we saw Washington do.
Right.
Yes, obviously, I would assume Arizona State fans would take Arizona State over Arizona, just
Every
like
time.
I take Ohio State over Michigan all
Every
the time.
time. Yep,
Every
you get it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you totally get it. There's plenty of games that could go one way or the other. Like there's some toss-ups here, like Washington State and UCLA and Oklahoma State. They feel like they could be toss-up games compared to your Oregons and your Utahs, your Washingtons, your USCs, where you feel like those are definitive losses. There's a handful of games on here that, like, if Arizona State plays great, they could be good. But it's a matter of executing and making sure that you get to that point. So that's where I hesitate, is how quickly are they going to acclimate to a new culture? If they do it like that, they will be right back in bowl conversation. But if it does take time to transition, there's going to be some tough, close losses this year. Bottom line, though, I think this is going to be a fun year, whether they win 4 games or they win 7 games. I think they're going to be fun to watch every week. I think this is going to be a team that really has that passion that we haven't seen in a few years.
Now, I know that neither of us are really thinking that it's possible for them to do this year, but could Arizona State be one of the sneaky teams that, it's all projected out there. They're ceiling 6-6. Their floor is probably 4-8. And then all of a sudden we're going into November and Arizona State has like 2 losses because they pulled a miraculous something out their wazoo against Washington in Seattle. And so now it really comes down to, well, you're going to Utah. Can you beat Utah in Utah at Reser Stadium? And you've got Oregon, but thankfully Oregon is at home. And do you have what it takes to get revenge against Arizona?
It would just have to be everything goes right for this team. And if everything goes right, this is the team that, in a best case scenario, looking at those first 8 games before they get to November, I feel like your definitive losses there are Washington and USC, probably Fresno State. I feel like the rest of those games could be winnable. So you could be looking at a 5-3 record. You could look at a 6-2 record if you are able to pull off some major upsets along the way. But I think your best case scenario would probably be a 5-3 team. But goodness gracious, for a team that won 3 games a year ago to already have 5 wins before November,
Mhm.
that is what energizes your team. Suddenly you're selling out games. And if you take a look, there are 8 home games this year.
Mhm.
2/3 of the schedule will be at home. If you are able to create momentum at the beginning of the year and you close the last 2 weeks at home, this is the kind of game, these are the kind of teams that get to people in the stands. And
Yeah.
when you get everybody motivated, and like Kenny Dillingham says, you activate the Valley, you
Mhm.
are going to get this team energized and they can be dangerous.
Absolutely. So I know that right now this doesn't necessarily pertain to you guys, but where do you think Arizona State stands currently with all this crazy shuffling going on with, SC, UCLA leaving for the Big Ten? Now you got earlier this week Colorado announcing, hey, you guys can't make up your mind on a media deal, so we're out of here. We're going back to the Big 12. And now I know it's just a rumor. We don't like to really, swim in the deep waters of speculation. I like to wait for confirmation, but there's a heavy rumor going around that now your rival, your arch rival, may also be headed for the Big 12. In your opinion, what do you think they can do to try to save the conference? Now, like we said, Arizona is not, 100% out there like, hey, we're headed out too. But I mean, do you think that they're better off to pull from the group of 5? Do you think that are we looking at by 2030 this conference is dead and now all the Pac schools are spread out between the remaining 4, leading to possibly the remaining 3, because I think the ACC is headed to being dead?
I would agree with you. I think that unfortunately, as much as I love the Conference of Champions,
Mhm.
it feels like there's an expiration date here. And when you lose the LA schools, that was a tough blow that was always going to be difficult to recover from.
Mhm.
Colorado leaves, that's tough. There's been talk about the 4 corner schools in general: Colorado, Utah, Arizona, and Arizona State. There's been talks about all of them getting pulled from the Pac 12. Suddenly you lose half your conference if those 6 teams are gone. The Big Ten has also looked at Oregon and Washington. Like, it feels like these teams are going to be cherry picked out of the Pac 12. And similar to the ACC, like you said, there were what I think like 6 programs that were looking at potentially making a move out of the ACC. It feels like we are inevitably going to be going towards 3 conferences with the Big Ten, the Big 12, and the SEC. That feels inevitable. It's going to happen. As much as I don't want it to, because I just love the purity of Power Five, I love the Conference of Champions.
Mhm.
We're getting to that point where I just don't know how sustainable this conference is going to be. And for the betterment of Arizona State, I
Mhm.
think that they should be looking on the outside. I think that they should be considering a move to the Big 12. There's so many more opportunities that it gives you. It allows you to have more travel from the West Coast to the
Mhm.
Midwest, where you can start advertising yourself to the Texas crowds, to the Louisiana crowds, to the Oklahoma crowds, where you have really good recruits. And you can place yourself on more national television because, unfortunately, right, wrong, or indifferent, people don't stay up for Pac 12 games. We love the hashtag Pac 12 After Dark because it's so much fun and
Mhm.
anything can happen. But nobody stays awake for Pac 12 games. You put
Right.
yourself in the Big 12, you're getting yourself a conference that has good media deals, that has good football teams, that's looking for teams to replace Texas and Oklahoma. And
Mhm.
like we said earlier, Arizona State has been considered a sleeping giant for a while. If they're able to assert themselves and build that momentum, if they were to go to the Big 12, they could throw themselves up there with TCU, with Baylor, with Oklahoma State. You would be able to propel yourself to those kind of heights. So, for the betterment of the future of this program, I do think that that needs to be something that they explore quite a bit. Again, I love the Pac 12, but as far as where you need to be, I think you need to be looking towards the future of your program and not the present.
I mean, so for one, do you think that college football in general, at least for the FBS level, is headed in the NFL direction, where maybe you end up making two conferences and you just divide the entire country as far as the like Power Five level into the two conferences? And what if college football becomes a parody of the NFL? Do you I don't know how much NFL you consume, if any, but do you feel like it would make college football worth it to watch at that point?
I hope it doesn't get to the point where the NFL is, because I love that you can separate the
Mm-hmm.
pros from the collegiate levels. And there's so much more purity with college football. And you not only have the FBS, you have the SES, you have Division 3 football, you've got JUCO. Like, there's so many different avenues that you can explore with college football. And if you were to go in a West Coast versus East Coast, I think that would just be a really worst case scenario for college football. I already don't like that you're going to potentially uh, three conferences with the Big Ten, the Big 12, and the SEC. I don't like that it's getting to that point. I prefer Power Five. I prefer having the ACC and the Pac 12 in there. But the reality is that you're just gearing up for that. When Texas and Oklahoma left the Big 12 to go to the SEC, it started a butterfly effect, and a snowball began tumbling down this mountain of programs leaving. USC and UCLA departed for the Big 10. Colorado's going to the Big 12. Clemson and several other schools have talked about leaving the ACC and joining the SEC. It feels inevitable that this is going to happen, right, wrong, or indifferent. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it. As far as will it get people interested, I certainly hope so. Like, no matter what ends up happening, whether it's splitting the country in half, whether it's having three conferences, whether it's having five conferences, I just hope that the college landscape is able to start drawing people in. And the NFL draft has really helped with that. The NFL draft over the last 10, 15 years has become one of the most marketable processes in all of sports. And the NFL feeds off of it. And we do mock drafts, and we do the combine, we do the Senior Bowl, we do all these things. And it generates that conversation about, man, I can't wait for Marvin Harrison Jr. and Brock Bowers and Caleb Williams to get to the next level. Like, I'm so excited about them. I want to watch them in college. And suddenly you turn on Ohio State, you turn on Georgia, you turn on USC. You start watching these players, you get to know them. I hope that it continues to steamroll the way that it has in the last 10 to 15 years, because college football is just so special in that you can have number one teams in the nation fall to unranked FCS teams. I know you'll love this, but Appalachian State taking down Michigan in the Big House, one of the greatest upsets in college football history.
Oh yeah.
You almost never see that in the pros. For college, that's just another Saturday. Any given Saturday is the way that we live. And it is just so special. And I really encourage people to really get more involved with college football. I love the NFL. I do. I watch it every Sunday. I put my Red Zone on. I put my Baltimore Ravens on. Sorry, I know that's probably going to ruffle your feathers a little bit there, but
All right.
I do love football for its entirety, pros, college alike. But college football just has such a grasp on my heart, and I wish that more people shared that same passion, whether it's two conferences or it's 40.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, I'm like you. I love to consume football, whether it's high school, college, pros. The pros, I mean, in my defense, I'm a Browns fan, so as a pro football fan, it's kind of hard to be like, hey, it's Sunday, let's watch some football. But I mean, it is what it is. So with USC and UCLA coming to the Big Ten, obviously the Big Ten eventually needs to pull more schools from the pack. If Arizona heads to the Big 12, do you think Arizona falls in pursuit to keep the rivalry? Or do you think that rivalry becomes like Georgia Tech, non-conference rival game at the end of the year, and maybe Arizona State heads over to the Big Ten? Because you need to give USC and UCLA West Coast opponents. They don't need to have to rely to come all the way out here all the time.
Yeah, no matter what happens, whether Arizona and Arizona State stay in the Pac-12 or they go to the Big 12, or one of them stays in the Pac, one of them goes to the Big 12, or one goes to the Big 10, one goes to the Big 12. No matter what, they are going to play each other every year, because it's not like this is a weird thing. You have Georgia Tech. You have North Carolina, South Carolina. You have Iowa State. You have the backyard brawl, which I know took a little bit of a break, but for the most part, West Virginia and Pittsburgh will play each other pretty regularly. Like, you have so many examples of teams that will continue their rivalries. Stanford and Notre Dame and USC play every year.
Yeah.
They keep those rivalries up even if there's independence or there's different conferences. ASU and U of A, what a lot of people don't realize, that is the oldest cup rivalry in college football. It dates back to the 1890s. The first cup bowl game, the Territorial Cup, that is the oldest college football cup series ever. You don't just throw that out the window. Nearly 130 years worth of rivalry. And these programs hate each other. I mean, I call it the team down south. I despise everything about Tucson, Arizona. When I have to go down there for games, I want to get there as late as I can and leave as early as I can. This is not a game that is ever going away. It will stay. No matter if they have to do an out-of-conference game every year, both programs will do it. It's just too good for these two schools to give up. There's so much marketing and opportunity that they can do that even if the rest of the country doesn't recognize it, the people in the state of Arizona do. And we care about this game so much. It won't go anywhere.
I know we've kind of gone away from Arizona, but or not Arizona, Arizona State. Sorry. What is the defensive outlook for 2023 for the Sun Devils, and who would be in your opinion, keep an eye out for that dude because he's really good. Who would be like your standout players on both sides of the ball?
Ro Torrance on defense. He plays corner. He's 6'3", 200 pounds. He's a shutdown guy. He is so talented and somebody who can move for big size. He's, as far as I'm concerned, there's an NFL future with this kid. And the way he plays the game, he's just such a smooth operator, and he's able to mirror and match whoever he's going up against. This is one of the best kept secrets in the Pac-12. Not a lot of people know who Ro Torrance is. They will by the end of the year. Looking at this defense, it's a brand new unit. You got a lot of transfers. You got a handful of freshmen. You've got a new defense coordinator and a new defensive staff entirely. Brian Ward is coming down from Washington State. Washington State has had one of the best defenses in the Pac-12 the last handful of years. He is bringing that philosophy to Arizona State. He's got these expectations for the returners, for the freshmen, for the transfers. They have a plan, and a concrete, established philosophy of what they want to be able to do, what they want to be able to accomplish this year. I look at what Brian Ward wants to do. I look at the talent that they have. They're going to have to overachieve. But there are players here. You've got Ro Torrance. You've got Chris Edmonds at safety, who's a bit of a ball hawk. You've got a handful of defensive linemen like BJ Green, who has either led the team or tied the team for the lead in sacks his first 2 years there. He is such an explosive player that can play tackle or edge. You've got Deshaun Mallory transferring from Michigan State, who's going to be playing that nose tackle role for you. You've got a handful of interesting linebackers. You've got nickel corner Jordan Clark, the son of NFL safety Ryan Clark. You've got so many players on this team that if they're able to mesh together and do what they want to do, this can be a much better defense than we realize. But I do think there's going to be a learning curve. Now, for what it's worth, Brian Ward and the rest of the defensive staff have all echoed together that they want this team to be a unit that doesn't play specifically to one position. They don't want the guy like Jordan Clark to only be a nickel. They want to be able to put him at free safety. They want to be able to put him near the line. They want their linebackers to be able to pass rush, to be able to drop into coverage, to call up the plays. They want their edge rushers to be able to kick inside and their defensive tackles to move closer to the edge. They want their safeties to come down. They want their players to play positionless football and be able to handle multiple assignments. If that works out and you have players that are able to do a little bit of everything, you can start throwing out different looks to the offenses, and suddenly this defense is able to create turnovers. They're able to create sacks and tackles behind the line of scrimmage. But it's asking a lot. It is asking a lot for all of these things to go right. So we'll see if they get to that point. But this could end up being a defense that sneaks up on people. I'm still, with this team, I just hesitate to go all in because there's just so much new moving parts. But if there's one thing I do like, if there's one thing I love, it's Brian Ward. And I think that he's going to turn into a very, very respected defensive coordinator within the next handful of years.
All right. Well, you definitely have to keep an eye out for both of them. I think that's about all the questions that I have for this time. I know your socials and everything that I went ahead and put up has been scrolling down the bottom, but where can people find you?
Yeah, so I'm on Twitter at Richie Brads with a Z 36. You can find my podcast for Arizona State. It's the Locked On Sun Devils podcast from the Locked On Podcast Network. You can find that on YouTube or wherever you're getting your podcasts. We're literally everywhere. It'll be going Monday through Friday. Once again, starting next week, we're getting out of the off-season schedule and getting ready for the regular season. We'll be keeping you up to date on all the training news and everything else that's going on in practice. And you can follow them on Twitter as well at LO_Sun Devils. But as far as Arizona State coverage is concerned, we're your number one source.
All right. Well, thank you very much for coming on. Hopefully either you guys have a successful season or make a bowl game. And hopefully we can have you back after the season's over.
Sounds like a plan to me. I appreciate you having me.
Absolutely. And I want to thank everyone for watching tonight. Please, these guys are awesome. They are doing this out of the kindness of their heart. I know we've mainly just talked to Locked On people, but it's because I love the work that Locked On does. I love the coverage that they have. And you know what? They're smarter than me. They know about their teams individually. They know about their conferences as a whole. So go check them all out, especially check out Richie over here with Locked On Sun Devils. Give him a follow everywhere. Forks up. And we will see you next time. Thanks everyone for joining us tonight, and have a good night.